Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new here, I'm Johnny Chivers. I'm a data engineer by trade, working Monday to Friday in the cybersecurity industry within the AWS tech stack. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the top 7 things data engineers do in AWS in a daily, monthly, and kind of weekly basis. This is a bit of my daily workflow leading up to the month and what I actually do day to day, so you can get a feel of what an AWS data engineer is actually all about. So the first thing I do as a cloud data engineer working in AWS is analyze data. And that's really fundamental. I analyze data at source before I start to do anything with it. This could be as simple as going into a database, which is great because it's usually structured in a way. So when I go in, I'm kind of looking at schemas and I'm looking at volume of data really before I start doing anything else with it. However, in my job, a lot of my data is actually in files in loads of different formats and structures and volumes, and it can be quite messy as well because it might not be the cleanest data that was ever collected. And recently, to try and analyze that data, I've really been taking advantage of some of the AWS tools. The first thing I do is get that data into S3 by any means. It could be as simple as a file copy, but for the larger data sets, it's usually some sort of FTP transfer. Once there, I use the AWS CLI and I actually move a portion of the data, if it's a massive file, into a Linux operating system or onto my Mac. If it's a smaller file, I'll just treat it in whole and just copy the whole thing across. Once there, I start using the Linux command line and Vim to do a whole host of things to that file to take a look. I use the head command to take a look at the top of the file. I use the tail command to take a look at the bottom of the file. I use Vim to open the file and then not be able to exit it. No, only joking. It's colon and then Q, if anyone wants to know, escape colon Q. And once in Vim, I can do a lot with that file as well, like pull rows, delete rows, have a look around. Once I kind of get the feel for the file and what we're doing, I have to move on to the second thing that I do a lot of in my job, and that's modeling data. So as a data engineer, we have to model that data, and that means breaking down the data from source into a useful format and structure for the end operation use case. That could be analytics or that could be user. Let's take an example that's quite traditional in the industry. You get a file and the file has personal information about a user. It's got their first name and last name, and it has also their address data. However, analysts at the end or applications might want to consume the person data and the address data separate, but also have a way to link them back together. And that's where a model comes in. We take the file, we break it down into the structure of person and address. We put the first name and last name into one table and we put the address information into another table. We have 2 keys on each table and we join the 2 keys together, maybe in a linked table, and therefore we have the ability to look at person separately from address, but we also have the ability to join the 2 things back together. Now, once I have all that ready to go, the next thing I look at is actually ingesting the data. That's the fun part. In my experience of working in AWS, the easiest thing to do is get your data into S3 first. I already said that I do it by any means possible, and I do mean by any means possible. I can copy the files, I'll do FTP transfers of the files, I'll even use AWS Glue sometimes to lift and shift data from a database into S3. Once I have it in S3, I can start to build more formal processes around the data, getting it shifted from that source format that I brought it in on to that model that I want as my end goal. Primarily, I use AWS Glue, which is the ETL tool from AWS. I also use some Lambdas. I also use command line where I would build a little script and then run that on an EC2 instance. But I really do this by any means possible. And that brings me on to the next thing I do as a data engineer, and that's build pipelines. Pipelines is a fancy way of saying what all the processes we do to get data from point A to point B are when we couple them together. So my usual pipeline, it might be ingest data to S3. It might be run a profiling script from Bash over the top of this using an EC2 compute instance. Report those results out. Bring Glue over the top. Use Glue to do ETL code and move that into a model. But of course, there needs to be a name for this whole ecosystem when it goes together, and that's what's known as a data pipeline. Now, once I have a pipeline, I actually have to schedule this all together, and that brings me on to the next thing I do as a data engineer in AWS, and that's orchestrate jobs. Job orchestration is where we organize those individual components of the pipeline and make them work dependently together, and I mean dependently. I don't want my Glue job kicking off for the transformations before the data's actually arrived. And that's where orchestration comes in. It's where you do your copy, and then the Glue job is waiting for a signal to kick off. There are different tools to help you do this. Some are enterprise level, such as Control-M. There's even a scheduler inside AWS Glue that lets you do triggers. But I personally like using Apache Airflow. It's an all-in-one shop where I can orchestrate everything across multiple AWS services and some stuff on-prem from one place. It's completely open source and is available to anyone to install for free. All you pay for is the compute instance. There's also a fully managed version from AWS that you can spin up in a matter of seconds, and this utilizes compute containerized nodes and an S3 bucket. It's a really good service if you want to build complex pipelines quickly, but you want something that's very reliable. And that's obviously all the kind of technical things I do on a daily basis about getting data from A to B. But part of my job also is coaching junior team members. I like to pass on the knowledge, like this YouTube channel, of all the different data engineering techniques and skills required for the AWS cloud. So as part of my job, I will coach and help and mentor more junior people on the team to bring them up to speed and hopefully progress their career and love for AWS. And that actually brings me on to the final point that I do. And I do a lot of POC and research into new data engineering tools in AWS. So for example, when things like governed tables come out in lake formation that lets us do upserts on the data, part of my job is to go off and evaluate that to see if there's a return on investment if we were to adopt that into our daily workflow. It's a really fun part of the job where I get to play with a lot of cool and emerging tech. And that's the great thing about data engineering. It's one of those kind of newer specialties, and it's actually evolving at a rate of knots. The tech is getting better and better and more interesting. AWS lowered the barrier to entry for people like me and you just to start learning at home. And that means that anyone can become a data engineer without having to spend a lot of money. And that's what I really like doing. I really like coaching people in AWS. I love making free data engineering content. Like last week, I put up a full free data engineering course on the channel, link above me now. I always make information for free on my website as well, link in the description. And if you want to see more content like this, then please like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching.